I've always heard praise for Maynard James Keenan, either with his work with Tool or with this band, even almost a little bit with Pucifier. And now that I've finally taken the time to sit down and listen to the music, I can see where all the praise comes from. Welcome to Ray Runner Does Music, where today we're taking a bit of a different dive into music as far as my music taste goes. When I say that, what I mean is anybody that knows me even a little bit personally knows that I mostly lean towards post-hardcore, pop-punk, and a little bit of just a little alternative rock as well. I mean, if you ask me to list my favorite bands, the bands that I would list would probably make a lot of people watching this video for a perfect circle just kind of click off. Although I've been trying to really expand my music taste as far as this past year goes, whether that be to anything from Periphery to Tempting Fate, which even those two bands, they're not necessarily the most, how should I say this? Patrician, I think is the term I'm looking for here. I don't know, I just hear that word brought up a lot in music groups that I'm in when it comes to bands that to me seem a little off and weirdly placed in music genres such as A Perfect Circle or Tool, but are widely loved by this very niche group. What I'm trying to get across here is that while I do have a very definite early 2010s, late 2000s music taste, I have been trying to expand my music taste, and when I heard that A Perfect Circle was dropping this new album, I saw that as an opportunity to both casually listen to some new music and, of course, critically look at it here on my channel here. So again, what we have here is A Perfect Circle, Eat the Elephants. That is the name of the album here. And I saw this album as a chance to really, once again, expand my music taste into a new spectrum, and even just one song in, I found that this was an experience through and through, truly to behold. I haven't listened to anything from Tool or Perfect Circle before, so hearing James's voice for the first time, it caught me off guard and made me stop everything I was doing. When I write a review, I usually like to do it in the moment. To give a brief explanation of my review process, I listen to the album casually first and write down some minuscule thoughts as I go through. Then the second time I go through, I try to pick out certain things, and then another casual listen. Although the first casual listen is the first one, or the one I should say that gets the most writing done from the base of it, but I couldn't even really write anything for that first listen, as I was just more concerned with actually absorbing the music that I was hearing in the moment. Can't really describe what's going on here, and really the lyricism itself is indescribable, at least from what I'm used to. I can't find words that really describe the atmosphere that Keenan can communicate with what seems like so little effort put into the process, but keep in mind what I just said, what seems like so little effort. What I'm saying is, I'm not trying to say that it comes off sloppy and under practice and unrehearsed. In fact, what I'm hearing more so seems that James has committed so much time to music. This is all an outsider's opinion here, so bear with me when I say these types of things. It seems like he's committed so much time to the craft, and especially this album, which I heard was in development hell, to say, for a number of years, that he can almost communicate emotion with very little effort on the outside, when it's obvious through the music and lyrics that he is putting forth a whole bunch of efforts here. This is a very stellar piece of audio art that I think the first song to really take a look at and touch on would be The Doomed, a track that picks things up literally and metaphorically. Reading into the themes for the album, I found that in the early parts of this album, there's a lot of elements that lie within the song especially that touch very head-on, but also satirically on issues like socio-political issues, things such as man's greed, whether that be attacking it or indulging yourself in it. And The Doomed really does sort of bounce in between these rich and societal outcomes and subjects, which I usually shrug off as being, what's the word, overdone and just almost laughable when so many people these days try to make a groundbreaking album that's like, oh, we're talking about the government, they're so corrupt. But what A Perfect Circle does is, again, when it seems like they're just barely touching on things, it seems as well that a lot more is being said without directly placing words within that. There's no direct quote or line from the song I feel like I can pull out to really get across the mystique of that song, so just to move on to another one, let's talk about Talk Talk. which is laden with quotable verses that would represent the track as a defining track for this album here. But instead of just trying to pick one out specifically, I'm just going to say that overall this track blew me away as compared to the quality of the rest of the songs on the album. Moving away from James Maynard Keenan, I don't know why I called him Leonard, the instrumental pieces of this album truly are something to really take a step back from and analyze. If you remember the review I did for I the Mighty's newest album, Where the Mind Wants to Go Where You Let It Go, I spoke very briefly, but also very in-depth in that brief moment, about how to build atmosphere through an album and really communicate this idea of just vast mystery and omniscience. And The Perfect Circle seems to pull this off, I gotta say, much better than I the Mighty, whether that be to having refined their talent throughout many more years than I the Mighty has been together, or some other way. Not dogging ITM in any way. In fact, I love them to death. They're in my top 10, but I'm just using it as a sort of comparable example here. An area, and I guess I should say an individual that really is a powerhouse and takes things to this next level largely on his own shoulders is, I gotta look at my notes here to try and pronounce his name correctly, Billy Howerdel. In studio sessions, it seems that, again, this album was very much stuck in development hell. It was a number of years and a number of ideas. In fact, I read something, I'm not sure if it's 100% confirmed, but apparently One More Light, the title track off of Linkin Park's newest album, was initially planned, or penned, at least in the conceptual stage, with A Perfect Circle in mind. Or I may be very wrong on that or mixing up certain things, but I do know that there was a connection from that song to the early studio sessions for Eat the Elephant here. So I find that very interesting to note here. But every keyboard section and guitar, I don't know if I should call it a riff or what, every guitar piece is meticulously crafted and placed to capitalize off his energy from the previous track and bring in more additions just every single moment of the album here. Dave Sardy shines in the string arrangements here as well, most notably the one he put together for So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, a personal favorite off this record for me as well. As the album went on, I expected the cliche of the longer it gets, the more drawn out and almost meaningless it feels, but I didn't really get in any elements of that, as even I was anticipating the dreaded tuned down tempo that a lot of bands try to go for to sort of settle a mood or create a mood. And even with songs like Delicious, which, while it might have been underwhelming compared to other songs here, it wasn't exactly bad by any stretch of the word. Some songs did tend to drag out a little bit, although again, I'm not discounting the quality for them by any means, such as DLB. I believe that track is meant as more of an interlude without necessarily being called an interlude, as it has a comparatively short length and purely instrumental construction, so I guess it was just a case of being pulled out of the moments and grounded as compared to being constantly thrusted and sort of dragged along this atmospheric ride that Eat the Elephant was trying to convey here. It feels very much like DLB is a detraction from that feeling and sort of really ruins the immersion of the album if that was to, be a thing. Off-putting endings to songs do happen very often, but more often than not, I found the jarring beginnings to songs that kept making me question if a song had the same quality as the previous one. Hourglass falls once again on my favorite side of things, but the beginning kept making me mentally tilt my head, but then the lyrics and instruments melted into a sound very reminiscent of late 90s music, at least in my own opinion, perhaps sort of callback to bands such as Queensryche or Rammstein, or at least that's the types of vibes I was getting off of the songs in the latter half of this album here. Prog music, prog rock, progressive, whatever this album wants to be called, or whatever this album is identified as, I'm not truly convinced to be a fan of. I'm not exactly pulled in as much as I thought I would be, but that's fine, really, in the long run. I didn't necessarily think this album was going to be the one to move me from one section of music to the other. Again, I'm very loyal to post-hardcore and pop-punk music, and I don't see that changing very much. I did find this album worth giving a thorough scrape through, though. In fact, I listened to it a little bit off and on, but once again, I returned to the roots of my music from before, and I do want to say that I want to make sure I do this release justice with the score that I'm giving it. I am a new listener, so I'm very tempted to give it a high score, as I've done in the past for first listens to albums for bands I've never heard of, such as when I first listened to Avatar, their album, excuse me, Feathers and Flesh. I was really tempted to give it a 9 out of 10, but I completely pushed that album to the side because I needed more time to really analyze it, of course, and the album's been out for a number of years, so that's an album I hope to go back and take a look at. But what I'm trying to say overall here is Eat the Elephant is certainly a very solid album by The Perfect Circle, and for all the reasons I just talked about, I'm going to be giving this album an 8.7 out of 10. I very rarely consider an album to be a perfect 10, as much as a lot of people who are fans of this album and this band have sort of touted this album as. This album definitely tried to make a best case for it. I will admit it did seem like at certain points the album really was trying to accomplish being grand more so than just being music. And while it did certainly hit the mark, it didn't hit the mark enough to really seal that nail in, of course. So like I said, 8.7 out of 10 is the score I'm giving for this album. But that is the review. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Do you agree with what I said? Do you disagree? Is Maynard James Keenan an untouchable god that shouldn't even be reviewed for his music because he's just too powerful? Don't forget to like, dislike, subscribe, unsubscribe, share it, tweet it, Instagram, tout it, and don't forget to be safe, everyone. I'll see you in the next video.